Good morning, Westover. Today we're continuing our series through the parables, and we will be hearing from Bruce Black. Bruce and Jeanette have been a part of Westover for about 5 years now, and before that, Bruce served many churches as a preacher for many years, and so it's an honor to get to hear from him. Fun fact, if you don't know, Bruce's brother Adam is one of our children's ministers, so it is a fun family affair as some of your kids and you all will be hearing from Bruce and Adam, a little brother ministry combo today. I'm very grateful for Bruce doing this. I'm off at a retreat in Tennessee, and I'm really grateful for the opportunity afforded to me by Bruce being willing to serve today. So give him a warm Westover welcome.
Thank you. I hope that you'll save that same applause for the end. We have a bunch of our young people are now going to start passing out some little bitty labels that look like this, and on it they have two numbers and a question mark. They say the number 50 or 500 question mark. Now, there's no lottery attached to this. It's something that I'm going to reference at the end of the sermon. If by chance, and these are really hard to pass out because they are laminated. If you don't get one, you have two options. One, you can come up and talk to me afterwards, and I will make sure that you get one. Or two, during the sermon, you can have a craft project. If there's a card in front of you, you can make a label size, take out of the card and put the 50 or 500 question mark on it. Or if you'd like to, at the end of the sermon and the end of worship, you can bring it up to me and I'll autograph it, and then you can sell it on eBay. Boy, it's pretty great to be a part of a church that's emphasizing discipleship, isn't it? It's real easy to get comfortable and with our Christianity and then kind of take it for granted and forget that somebody shared it with us, or we wouldn't be the people that we are. So we have an opportunity, as we've been talking about it from our leadership and continuing to do things. I love this idea of this discipleship retreat later in the fall. Well, we can not just focus on it, but we can also learn some skills to be able to make that happen. As Luke said, we're going to continue in this series on the parables. And let's check our watches real quick. What time do you have? I've got 10:42. What? No, I have people back there going, no. Jesus did some pretty incredible things, and he could have gone by a lot of different names. But you might be surprised to learn that over 50 times in the gospel, Jesus is simply addressed by people as teacher. Teacher. Jesus was the master teacher. And one of the things that set him apart from other teachers is his ability and his willingness to tell stories. Jesus told lots of stories. In fact, some people who may have more time on their hands than they should have looked at the books of Matthew, Mark, and Luke and actually counted and discovered that 1/3 of all of Jesus' spoken words found in those three books were spoken in parables. Jesus understood that telling great truths in story form makes those truths understandable, memorable, and shareable. Look at what Matthew says about Jesus' teaching style. Jesus always used stories and illustrations like these when speaking to the crowds. In fact, he never spoke to them without using such parables. This fulfilled what God had spoken through the prophet. I will speak to you in parables. I will explain things hidden since the creation of the world. Stories are powerful tools and ways to clearly explain the deep mysteries of God. So that's why I love this series. I think it's so important because it's connecting us in ways that help us understand, to keep them in our minds, and then share them with other people. Today we're going to look at a parable that may have slipped by you. It certainly had slipped by me. As I started putting notes together and thinking about it, I came to the realization that in all my years of working in teaching and preaching, I have never once taught a class or preached a sermon about this parable. It's not one of Jesus' famous parables. In fact, when Jesus first spoke this parable, it took all of 25 words for him to say it. But in spite of the fact that it's not one of his most famous, I'm convinced it has an incredibly important message for us in our culture today, because this parable talks about how to express great love. In fact, it's the only parable that Jesus tells that directly addresses love. I think that's a good fit for Valentine's weekend. The parable is called the parable of the two debtors. We're going to read it in just a minute, but it's found in a story that Luke uses to record an episode from Jesus' life. If you have your phones, or if you're old school and actually have a Bible with you, you can turn it to Luke chapter 7, verses 36 through verse 50. But before we read this parable, I want to share some context about what's happening in this episode from Jesus' life. The first is, Jesus is invited to a dinner party by a Pharisee. A Pharisee was a religious and political leader of Jesus' time among the Jews. Pharisees were held in high regard by their fellow citizens and given great respect for their external religious practices and their expertise in understanding the law of Moses. The Pharisee that is hosting the dinner is a guy named Simon. Simon most likely lived in a house that was typical of influential people of his day. The house was built in such a way that it was open to the outside, where people could move in and out and into the house with great ease. In Jesus' day, in spite of the painting of the Last Supper, people didn't sit at a table to eat with their feet under the table like we do. Actually, they reclined when they ate, reclining on a low couch with their head near the table, resting in their left arm so they could reach the food with their right arm. Their legs would be extended behind them, and they would have their sandals off while they were eating. In Jesus' culture, there were also some basic social conventions on how to honor people when they came into your house as a guest. The first was, since the roads were all dirt, you would offer them water to wash their feet. In our culture, when hosts welcome guests, we shake their hand when they come in or give them a light hug. In Jesus' day, the host would kiss them on the cheek. Also, guests would be offered some oil to put on their heads to help them feel and smell refreshed after their journey. And one final bit of local culture. The denarius was the common currency in the Roman world, so also in Israel. A denarius, or a silver coin, was something that was earned by workers after working for a full day. Now to the dinner party. Jesus is invited to a dinner party by Simon the Pharisee, who also invites some of his Pharisee friends. Unbeknownst to Simon, there was a woman in the community of a checkered reputation. She discovers that Jesus is on the guest list, and she's desperate to see him. So she does the unthinkable. She devises a plan to go into this party to meet Jesus. It's a crazy idea. She, with her checkered reputation, is going to go into a dinner party with a bunch of religious men. But she doesn't. She sneaks indoors, and as she does, she looks for Jesus. She finds him. She goes to his feet while he's reclining, and she kneels down beside him. Most probably around her neck, she is carrying a very beautiful jar of extremely expensive perfume. As she kneels by Jesus' feet, she is so overwhelmed by his goodness, and knowing her true self, she begins to weep. Her tears land on Jesus' feet, and as they do, she begins to massage them into his dirty feet. This continues. She continues to cry, and at some point, she finds her lips on his feet as she begins to kiss them. Then she opens this extremely expensive bottle of perfume and pours it on Jesus' feet and begins to rub his feet with that amazing ointment. Finally, she unloosens her hair, and with her hair, she dries his feet. It's an incredibly beautiful story, except to the host, Simon. You see, Simon saw what this woman was doing to Jesus, and he realized he knew this woman, and he really knew her reputation. And Simon thought to himself, not so much about the woman, but about Jesus. And he asked himself, silently, this man can't be a prophet, because if he was, he would know who this woman is, and she's a sinner. Jesus, showing his divinity, is aware of Simon's thinking, and he turns to him and says, Simon, I have something I want to speak to you. And Simon replies, go ahead, teacher. And then at that moment, Jesus shares this 2-verse parable. Let's stand up as we read it. Then Jesus told him this story. A man loaned money to 2 people, 500 pieces of silver to one and 50 pieces to the other. But neither of them could repay him, so he kindly forgave them both, canceling their debts. Who do you suppose loved him more after that? You can sit down. Parable's pretty simple. Debtor 500 owes the lender 15 months worth of salary. Debtor 50 owes the lender 7 weeks. The problem is neither of them can repay their debt. And that's important for us to realize, because in that culture, if you couldn't pay back your debt, you were going to prison. And while you were in prison, you would earn money toward that debt, but I think we can be pretty sure it wasn't a denarius a day. But instead of going to prison, the unbelievable and unthinkable happens. The lender kindly, graciously, and mercifully forgives the debt and cancels it. And then Jesus says, who do you think loved the lender more? Simon answered, I suppose the one whom canceled the larger debt. That's right, Jesus said. Then he turned to the woman who was kneeling, and he said, look at this woman kneeling here. When I entered your home, you didn't offer me water to wash the dust from my feet, but she has washed them with her tears and wiped them with her hair. You didn't greet me with a kiss, but from the time I first came in, she has not stopped kissing my feet. You neglected to give me the courtesy of olive oil to anoint my head, but she has anointed my feet with rare perfume. I tell you, her sins, and they are many, have been forgiven. So she has shown me much love. But a person who is forgiven little shows only little love. Then Jesus said to the woman, your sins are forgiven. The men at the table said among themselves, who's this man that goes around forgiving sins? And Jesus said to the woman, your faith has saved you. Go in peace. It's ironic, isn't it, that in his answer and his response, Jesus proves exactly what Simon was questioning. Jesus does, in fact, know the character of the one who is touching him, this woman. And he also knows the character of his host that's judging him. Let me share with you quickly something that they didn't teach me when I was in graduate Bible school. They did not teach me how to deal with homeless people, how to deal with the unemployed, how to deal with people who couldn't pay their bills. I was never taught how to deal with people who have a hard time coping with reality, nor was ever taught how to deal with people who battle with addiction. Yet, I will tell you that in my 35 years of working with local churches, I have had helped people in those categories in the scores of numbers. They would come to the building during the week, even on the weekend, and I would bring them into my office. I would ask how I could help them, and then I would listen to them tell me their story about how they had ended up in this situation. Some of them were gut-wrenching, heart-rending stories. Sadly, others often had such big holes in them that you could drive a Ford F-150 pickup through them. But no matter what the story, how truthful it was or wasn't, I and the churches that I worked for, tried to help people as best we could. But sometimes it was a challenge. I can remember about working in a church in Southern California when a woman who I didn't know called the church, asked for me, and said this. She said, "I understand that you're giving my adult son canned goods. I want you to stop doing that." I went, "Why?" And she said, "Because he's selling those canned goods and using the money to buy drugs." I want to tell you an incident an encounter that I had with an individual that was kind of like this dinner party that we just read about. It was on a Wednesday night in Michigan when we were having Bible study and a devotional. It was back in the mid to late 80s when Wednesdays still counted. Bible class was over, our joint devotional was over. I was standing in the front of our auditorium talking to people, and a couple of our church members came stalking up to me and said, "There's a guy out in the lobby you need to go talk to." So I followed them into the lobby, and I met this fellow. I saw him. He was big. 6'2", if he was an inch, maybe taller, weighing a good 225 pounds plus, not overweight at all. He was built really big. He was in his early to mid-40s. He had a full, untrimmed beard, muddy work boots, jeans that were filthy, and a shirt that was untucked and frayed. I took a deep breath, I took my hand out, I introduced myself, we shook hands, and I said, "What can I do to help you?" He looked down at me and said, "Could we go somewhere private to talk?" I said, "Sure. Let's go to my office." And we did. Did I mention that he was big? Two quick things you need to know about me that you may not. The first is this: after dealing with so many people in these categories who have come asking for help, and having been in situations like this, I want to confess to you that I can become quite judgmental on the spot. And I can see people as a problem rather than a person to be loved. I also want to tell you that I am much weaker than I look. So we went into my office, and my office was set up in such a way that I had my desk to the side, and there were chairs where I would talk with people. I didn't want to have a barrier between us. So I sat down in a chair like this, and this big fellow sat down in a chair 6 to 7 feet away from me, closer than that first pew was. And he began talking. And I learned quickly that he wasn't unemployed, nor was he homeless. He actually was the construction supervisor for a franchise restaurant that was being built in our town. He had a big job. He apologized quickly and said, "I'm sorry for my appearance, but I didn't want to miss worship, so I came straight from the work site." And then he continued and he said, I live a long way from home. I live in the South, and I think it might have been Louisiana, and this was Michigan. And he said, my family lives down there, my wife does, and because of the distance, I'm not able to go home but once a month to see my wife. And then he started really opening up and pouring his heart out. He said, I'm really struggling, and I'm hurting. And then he got very emotional as he started talking about the struggles that he had with temptation that comes with loneliness and the pain that he was feeling and experiencing being away from family and away from the support group that he had at home. And then he did the most amazing thing. Out of his chair, this huge man lunged at me. Realizing, as you do, how weak I am, you weren't surprised to know that I recoiled and flinched. When I opened my eyes, this man was on his knees at my feet. His big arms were on my legs, and his meaty hands were put together and clasped. He was looking up at me with tears in his eyes, and he said this to me: will you pray for me? I collected myself, and I did. I did pray for him. And I walked him out to the parking lot, said goodbye, walked back into my office and sat down in that same chair and prayed that God would forgive my judgmental and unforgiving heart. You see, I had seen that man, but I hadn't really seen him. I had made a judgment when I saw him and walked up to him in that lobby, and I had seen him as other than me. I had seen him as less than, as another problem that needed to be dealt with. But I think that we can all agree that the person that had the problem wasn't that man. It was me. It was me. I mean, how do you get like that? How do you become like a Simon and point a finger and judge them? How do you become like me, looking at somebody like that and feeling as though they're less than? That's important to understand. And how do you keep from coming like that? How do you keep from making quick judgment assessments about people and then show them little love because you feel as though they're just people to be avoided? How can you love like Jesus and live like him and offer mercy and acceptance to the people in your lives, whoever they are? How can you increase your capacity to love? I guess, well, fortunately for us, this short little parable that we were looking at shows us just that. We're able to love people, this parable tells us, when we begin to understand the debt that we owe God. It's pretty clear, I think we can agree, that the lender in this short little parable is God. And this parable assumes that we all owe God a debt. Now, this self-reliant, religious, practicing, letter of the law knowing Simon didn't feel like he owed much of a debt. And as a result, he judged much and loved little. In sharp contrast, this woman, who's unnamed, was deeply aware of the great debt that she owed God. She knew she needed what Jesus could do. And I think we all could agree that her ability to express love was stunning. Look at this verse again that kind of shows the two of these approaches to debt to God, and see what it has to say. Jesus says to Simon, I tell you, her sins, and they are many, have been forgiven. So she has shown me, don't miss it, much love. But a person who is forgiven little shows only a little love. How do you discover what you owe God? What's your debt? How do you discover? Are you 50? Are you a 500? To figure out your spiritual debt, unfortunately, we have to talk about a very sensitive subject that you can be sure of you weren't planning on hearing on Valentine's weekend. It's a subject that we become very nervous about and hesitant to talk about in our culture, and sometimes even in our church circles, even among Christian friends, and that subject is sin. When's the last time you heard somebody talk about sin in a private conversation? We may be hesitant and nervous about talking about sin, but Jesus wasn't. He talked about it and its consequences a lot and often. In his very first sermon, which probably is his most famous, he confronts sin. In the very beginning of this sermon, he says, if your righteousness, your ability to do right with the temptations and sins I'm getting ready to tell you, doesn't surpass the experts of religion in your culture, you'll never enter the kingdom of heaven. And then Jesus goes to work in the Sermon on the Mount, and he talks about the sins of anger, refusing to correct wrongs, lust, selfish divorce, dishonesty, taking revenge, prejudice, phony worship, materialism, judgmentalism, and hypocrisy. Let me ask you, do you deal with that stuff in the right way? Me either. Look at what Paul has to say about how serious the consequences of sin are. To the Christians in Ephesus, he writes, once you were dead because of your disobedience and your many sins. You used to live in sin, just like the rest of the world, obeying the devil, the commander of the powers in the unseen world. He's the spirit at work in the heart of those who refuse to obey God. All of us used to live that way. All of us used to live that way, following the passionate desires and inclinations of our sinful nature. By our very nature, we were subject to God's anger, just like everyone else. But God is so rich in mercy, and he loves us so much that even though we were dead because of our sins, he gave us life when he raised Christ from the dead. It is only by God's grace that you have been saved. God saved you by his grace when you believed. And you can't take credit for this. It's a gift from God. Salvation is not a reward for the good things that you've done. So no one can boast from it. When it comes to sin, let me inform you and tell you about myself. We're no different than anybody else. We're all the same. Your sin, my sin is so devastating that each of us are dead to God. That's how serious sin is. God doesn't look at sin like it's some unfortunate habit like spitting in public. It's an eternal killer. And I don't know much about finances, but I do know this, that dead people can't pay back debts. But Jesus and Paul tell us that we don't have to remain that way. That we can react to our sin as this woman did, with deep sorrow for the debt we can never repay, surrendering ourselves to Jesus and putting our faith in his power to forgive us and the debt we can never repay. When we see ourselves as she did, we confess clearly who we are and what we need. We find ourselves falling at Jesus' feet as she did and confessing, I'm hopeless. Can you help me? Jeanette and I have been married for 48 and a half years. Here's a picture I think we can get. There it is. I know it's hard, but I want you to focus your attention on me in that picture. Check me out. Look at that picture, and if you notice, I look pretty good in that $25 rental tux. And you'll also notice I have, what are those cuffs that I have on? I think they're frilly or something, the puffy shirt. Now look at me here. Look at me right here. You may notice some subtle differences. Let's see if I can list them real fast because we're running out of time. Top of my head, I have less hair. I've lost a lot of hair and I'm losing a bunch more. Unfortunately, though I'm losing it here, it sprouts up in many other unexpected places. That's why in our family we have what I call Bruce's periodic plunking parties, which I am not a participant, but I'm someone that is being worked on. If you know me well, you know that I have serious hearing loss. You'll notice these hearing aids that I have. They're great, but unfortunately, they don't bring my hearing back to normal. If you look at my face, you'll discover, if you look closely, that because of my years of refusing to use sunscreen, I have sun damage on my face, and particularly on that, oh, it's not up there anymore, that cute little nose that I used to have. This past year, I had a tooth implant, another tooth crowned. The skin of my arm has become so crepey because of skin damage, and my skin is so thin on the back of my hands and my arms that bruises seem to magically appear. Moving down, I'm currently in physical therapy because I have arthritis and soft tissue damage to both of my knees. And you can watch Jeanette grimace as I tell you this, that on my left big toenail, I have a fungus that I can't get rid of. That's what she lives with every day. She has to forgive me, the Bible says so. Now let me share with you the things that you can't see about me. And that picture are right here. I've lived with Jeanette longer, not surprisingly, and more intimately than any other person on earth. And during our 48 and a half years, she has seen some of the very worst of me. During our time together, there have been times that I have shaded the truth, that I've told her flat out lies, that I've kept secret, that I've acted and spoken to her in anger, that I've broken promises, that I've shut her down by giving her the silent treatment. I've been deeply selfish at times, and I've hurt her, and I've injured our relationship. I've put other people many times before her and our daughters, to the point that once Jeanette sat me down and said this, when you say yes to everyone else, you're saying no to us. At times, I've been rude, thoughtless, insensitive, and uncaring to her. There are times that both of us know that I have done wrong, and wronged her. And when she confronted me with it, I denied it. I want you to know that I have shared that list with Jeanette before I shared it with you. And I've thanked her for her forgiveness in the past and for her forgiveness in the present. But I shared with her also the confession I'm getting ready to share with you. And I'm being deadly serious when I share this with you. There have been times throughout our married life, and even in just the near past, when I have thought to myself this thought, she's lucky to have me. That's scary, isn't it? Isn't that scary? That you could be so out of touch of how somebody forgives you every day. And yet, I do it. And as scary that is, it's even more tragic to think that's what I do with God. You see, it's very easy to think you're a 50 when you're really a 500. You want to know how to love people more? You figure out the debt that you owe God. And once you understand that debt, then you're ready to go to his feet and ask and accept the forgiveness that he's willing to give you. And then once you get that forgiveness, you can then show great love. That's how it happens. You own it. You go to him who can pay it. And then his love flows into your life, and you can share that big love with the people around you. Now, for those slips of paper, if you didn't get one, make one of your own, or we'll make sure you get one. Here's the deal with that little slip. What I would like you to do, here's our homework for the next month. I want you to put that piece of paper somewhere where you can put your hand on it regularly. On my phone, I have a clear case, so I've got it on the back. Tape it on your phone. If you have a frustrating commute, put it on your steering wheel. But here's what I want you to do. I want you to keep it somewhere close to you that's easily accessible for the next month. And then I want you, when you feel tempted to be unloving out of arrogance, anger, judgmentalism, selfishness, or pride, or just being a jerk, pull that puppy out and look at it and ask yourself, am I a 50 or a 500? Don't I need forgiveness every day? God, please help me to realize that I'm not special. I'm not unique. I'm like everybody else. I need forgiveness. You see, here's the two lessons as we close. The two lessons to learn from this short parable of the two debtors. The first is this: there are no 50s. We're all 500s. We're all 500s. In fact, let's say that together on 3. 1, 2, 3. We're all 500s. The second thing that you need to take away from this parable is this. If you want to have big love, much love that's talked about in this parable, you've got to own that debt. You've got to go to Jesus and get the forgiveness that he offers you, and then his love comes flowing into your life. And then great love can come out. This next month, let the continuing Valentine's Day present to the people in your life be this. Be a person who admits their 500 debt, who then accepts God's 500 forgiveness, and then has the ability to show 500 love. You want to be a person of big love? Then don't be a self-reliant 50 like Simon, but rather be a sin-broken, self-surrendering, nameless woman who put her faith in Jesus and whose life calls out to each of us. Live like me so you can love like me. Let's pray. God, thank you so much for making your truth so straightforward. Help us today to see our sin as you see it. Help us to admit that we are all 500s. Help us to own how big our sin is, and help us to fall at Jesus' feet, knowing he is our only hope of grace and forgiveness. Keep us constantly connected to the consequences of our sin so we can stay glued to your grace and forgiveness. Help us to lean on your forgiveness and mercy so that we can honor you like this woman did, with extravagant worship, and show the big love that you and the people in our lives and in our world deserve. And Jesus, thank you from raising us from the death of sin and making us alive to God's eternal grace and love. Together we all pray through your name. Amen.